Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining us again for Teacher Librarian Day 2022. I'm here with Roland Schendel, Professor of Literacy, and I'll let him introduce himself here in a sec. We're going to share some primary sources and trauma-informed practice strategies for you today. Raleigh?
So this is technically TIP and TPS through the LOC. So we're focusing on some trauma-informed practices, like Kyle said, and I'm delighted to be here with you today. I'm a literacy professor in the Department of Elementary Education and Literacy at MSU of Denver. So we want to kind of launch with Parker Palmer's quote here to celebrate and honor all of you that are participating. Good teaching requires self-knowledge. It is a secret hidden in plain sight. So this absolutely has everything to do with trauma-informed practices, with social emotional learning pedagogies in the classroom. And we're going to delve into this today through three pretty engaging and insightful activities.
What do you think that secret means? Like, what does he mean by a secret?
I think as teachers, it's crazy because I remember one time I looked over at one of my peers and we're eating lunch and I'm like, why does Clifford do this? Why does Clifford do that? Why won't he? What do I need to do to make him do this or to engage? And my peer was like, why don't you go ask him? So I think as obvious as that was to me in that moment, the other revelations, insights, and solutions to what we're trying to accomplish as teachers is to look right at ourselves, inside ourselves, and go, why do I do this? What else might I do? Pocket full of change, cultural humility, my fragility, the capacity to testify on behalf of my own biases and needs, to get stuck in the weeds for true understanding, planting seeds, opening leads, embracing my greed for self-insight, relinquishing flight, bolstering my fight against others' plight. It begins with me, but I need help. May you lend a hand?
I love that poem, Raleigh. That's a really nice poem. I'm wondering, throughout it, it's all about you, right? My plight. I need help. And at the end, you call to somebody else, may you lend a hand. Where were you kind of going with that?
Well, I realized, as a result of that conversation with my peer at lunch, and then just all that I've learned over the years, that most of the help comes from my students. Certainly their caregivers, their families can lend a helping hand to help me understand the world better and reach more students. And in the essence of cultural humility, I'm me. And so I'm limited by what my experiences have been, my background, who I have been reared to become, and how I've been shaped by those around me. So the intense support and impact of others on my development is necessary. So kind of that's where I was headed.
Is that kind of what you're meaning by humility? Like this idea that you have to come to terms with who you are and who you're around and all of that to really understand yourself better?
Yeah, that's very much a part of the journey. And really then the question is, so what is cultural humility? So here you have a chance to read this brief text, 3 Things to Know, Cultural Humility. But before you read, we want you to kind of think about how you're going to hold your thinking and make sense of the text. There aren't a lot of words. There are plenty, right? There's a page or 2, maybe. But we want you to either use List Mania. So with List Mania, you list as many words or phrases or questions that you have from the text or that come up as a result of the text. While you're reading or after you're reading, or just pause in between maybe each section and just write like crazy and then keep reading. Or use found poetry. And with found poetry, you may know, you use actual terms and phrases right from the text, pull those out and actually craft those into something meaningful that makes sense to you. Or you can use response poetry and just use the ideas, the inspiration, the experience of the reading to kind of mold those notions and that thinking into some kind of poem that you could share later or use to grow.
I really like that response poetry idea, mainly because it gives people ideas, students ideas. If they don't know where to start, you know, the response gives you that emotion to start with for whatever the poem is. And then you get to respond to it in your own language, in your own emotions.
Now would be a great time to pause and just read this brief article and complete one of these tasks to hold your thinking. So with this second activity, this is a pretty powerful opportunity for you. You may not realize that now, but after you try this several times, you'll realize that you actually probably already do this. And you think back and it's about having like speaking remorse, or, oh my gosh, why did I just say or do that in my classroom? And instead of just thinking through that, actually thinking through that a specific experience with a cultural humility lens, and putting pencil to paper, pen to paper, or your fingers to the keyboard, and actually capturing your thinking and kind of rewriting the script, so to speak, so you can maybe even kind of break that cycle of abuse, so to speak. I mean, that's a pretty strong phrase, but essentially when we're irked by what we do and say, it is abusive or can be. So we want to break that and make it more positive, more inspiring to our students and to all students. So to connect with them. So now would be a great time to pause and try this out. So spend a few minutes, spend 20 minutes if you need to. If you need an idea or some insight, you can jump to the next slide to take a peek at a sample. So here's just a basic example of one of the many powerful learning experiences I had in the classroom. And with respect to cultural humility, here it is. The scenario was that Jesse was aroused and just really kind of picking on Clifford, so accosting him verbally. And I jumped in and I just said, Jesse, this behavior is unacceptable. And then, you know, scooted Jesse out of the classroom to reflect on his behavior and to think about what he could do differently. What I might have said through a lens of cultural humility and taking a breath is, Jesse, breathe. So with this activity, we use inspiration from a practice called photo language, which is nothing short of phenomenal. And this is pretty incredible because it gives words to concepts, it gives words to images, it gives images to concepts, it brings reality and understanding to ambiguous terms and phrases and makes them concrete and fathomable, especially in young learners' minds. So with this, you're basically going to spend 2 minutes and you can craft a new list of words and terms that are coming to your mind with respect to cultural humility, or you can go back to your list mania or your found poetry or your response poetry from earlier and pull those words from those texts that you've already created. What we want you to do is, after you craft that short list or long list, and we want you to find one or several of those terms or phrases that you want to visually represent. You're going to get to visually represent those through primary sources that you capture through the Library of Congress and Google image or two. So specific instructions: collect 2 to 5 primary source images and 1 to 3 Google images to create a text set that kind of encapsulates or begins to sculpt your understanding of cultural humility.
And a good place to start with this is, after you've chosen those terms, just search the term, see what comes up. You know, filter through 100 different images and find the one that really speaks to you.
So here's an example of some of the words that I drew from my understanding of cultural humility. And these were actually pulled directly from my response poem from the very beginning of this teaching and learning experience. So here are a couple images to showcase fragility. What I thought was interesting was I pulled bias out, and I'm like, okay, really, what is bias? And I searched, Webster's definition of bias, and I had no idea. I looked at this definition and was like, oh my gosh, that makes perfect sense to me. The oblique course taken by a ball as a result of its irregular shape. Essentially, I think of myself as an irregular shaped ball, and that I don't just roll straight forward or following a predetermined path or a logical path. And I think that helps me make sense of being human and trying to embrace cultural humility, and all through a simple image of a football.
Mm-hmm. And that's a lot like the inquiry process too, right? Like we're going on one direction, we find a lot of really amazing sources this way, and then we're like, wait, tangent, let's go on this direction. We're going to go in this way. So that's that irregular shape, hey, I'm going this way, I'm going that way. You never really know where that inquiry process is gonna take you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that analogy. So greed was one of the other words that I pulled from this, and essentially it was about my greed for finding self-discovery so I could become a better teacher through social emotional learning practices and really understanding my students and their diversity and their background. So this was just one of the images I found. A couple Puck images, if you're not familiar with Puck's cartoon drawings, they're nothing short of phenomenal. They really get at the heart of some of the concepts that we are bewildered by. Another phrase or word that I pulled from was hand. And I really felt like I need a hand, I need help. And I love this image on the left because it's really kind of a heartfelt cupping embrace. And then on the right, I thought this was just so phenomenal. And this worker's hands and how those have seen so many grips, so many devices, so many tools, so many things within them, and what kind of help and support might those give as a result of their journey through life. A couple other images to kind of showcase hand and what's possible, a little bit of hilarity and cartooning, and then certainly something just absolutely beautiful, and that's kids holding hands and seeing the world through new eyes.
Yeah, so thanks everybody for joining us. I hope this really gave you some launching points, some ideas to help integrate those TIP strategies with some primary sources. And really it's all about understanding those abstract concepts like anxiety or cultural humility, or these things that affect us every day of our lives as teachers, as students, as people, and working to understand that through historical references.
Yeah, we would encourage you to try some of these activities out with other terms, other phrases, use them in math, but yeah, really use this process to kind of unearth the thinking of your peers and yourselves, and kind of use this with your teammates, use this with caregivers, a caregiver group that you teach on Tuesday nights once a month. Sit down and use these practices with your principal and kind of get at the heart of where you sit, where you stand, and what your your perch, your identity is as educators, and how you might strive to grow together.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.